Most accounts of Operation Market Garden begin with the image of a bold gamble glider sweeping over Holland, the dash of XXX Corps, and the tragic weight of the British at Arnhem. The popular narrative points to a few bad weather days, a crack SS division refitting in the wrong place, or simply a bridge that was, as Cornelius Ryan famously put it, too far. But if you look past the airborne mystique and the Hollywood veneer of a bridge too far, you find something far more disturbing than a plan that was merely overambitious. What you find is a study in systemic failure. The reality is that Market Garden was not defeated by German tenacity alone. It was defeated before the first paratrooper loaded onto his aircraft. Defeated by a cascade of command ineptitude that began with a willful disregard for intelligence, was compounded by an air plan designed for convenience rather than combat, and was ultimately sealed by a ground force that behaved as if it was on a peacetime road march rather than a desperate dash to relieve a surrounded division. The traditional focus on the heroism at the bridge obscures the real lesson's strategic vision. Without operational competence is merely a fantasy. To understand Market Garden is not to mourn a lost opportunity to end the war in 1944, but to examine how hubris, rigid doctrine, and a failure to adapt condemned 10,000 men to capture or death. Let's strip away the legend and look at the ineptitude, layer by layer. The first and most damning failure occurred not on the ground, but in the intelligence rooms where uncomfortable truths were buried. It has become convenient to claim that the presence of the 2nd SS Panzer Corps at Arnhem was an intelligence surprise. This is a myth that has survived because it is a convenient excuse. The truth is that ultra-intercepts, aerial photography, and reports from the Dutch resistance all pointed to the same conclusion. Armor was in the area. Photographs showed tanks, specifically Panzer IVs, hidden under the trees around Arnhem. The Dutch resistance, whose credibility Montgomery famously distrusted, provided detailed order of battle information. One intelligence officer, Major Brian Urquhart, the chief intelligence officer for the Airborne Corps, saw this data and raised the alarm. He presented photographic evidence to his commander, Lieutenant General Frederick Boy Browning. Urquhart argued that the operation was unsound, that dropping lightly armed paratroopers directly onto an armored refitting area was suicidal. Browning's response was not to cancel the plan or adjust it. It was to remove Urquhart from his post and send him away on sick leave, effectively silencing the messenger. The intelligence was suppressed not because it was wrong, but because it was inconvenient to the momentum of the plan. This is not a failure of espionage, it is a failure of command. It reveals a leadership culture where the desire for a decisive victory overrode the responsibility to verify the battlefield reality. Beyond the ignored intelligence, the tactical blueprint for the airborne landings displayed a fundamental misunderstanding of the weapon Montgomery had chosen to wield. The Royal Air Force controlled the air plan, and they refused to fly the paratroopers directly over the Arnhem Bridge. Anti-aircraft batteries around the town were deemed too dangerous. Instead, the British 1st Airborne Division was dropped 6 to 8 miles away from its primary objective. This decision alone stripped the attackers of their only true advantage: surprise. Historian Anthony Beaver is blunt on this point. If you lose surprise and you are lightly armed, you are going to get a very bloody mess. Furthermore, due to a shortage of transport aircraft, the division had to be flown in over 3 days. This meant that while the first wave fought and died trying to reach the bridge, the second wave was still in England, waiting for the weather to clear. The plan deliberately fed a division into battle piecemeal against an enemy who had been given a 24-hour warning. It was not a coup de main, it was a parachuted siege. At the same time, the ground component of the operation, the Garden, was built on a single elevated 2-lane road. This was not a highway of advance, it was a logistical choke point. Any half-track that broke down, any ambush at a culvert, would halt the entire corps. The planners accepted this risk, assuming the Germans would be too disorganized to react. They assumed wrong. But perhaps the most revealing evidence of strategic ineptitude lies in the behavior of the ground forces once they crossed the border. The Guards Armored Division, tasked with spearheading the relief, had a directive reach Arnhem in 48 hours. They had the firepower, the air cover, and at first, the light opposition. Yet on the first day, they halted at dusk. They followed the standard operating procedure that tanks do not fight at night. But this was not a standard operation. This was a rescue mission. The contrast between British and German tactical doctrine here is, well, just stark. German doctrine, forged in the crucible of the Eastern Front, emphasized Auftragstaktik, mission command. Junior leaders were expected to use initiative to achieve the objective no matter the situation. British doctrine in 1944, by contrast, was far more rigid and centralized. The result was that when the 82nd Airborne finally captured the Nijmegen Bridge on the 20th, after a heroic and costly river assault, the Guards tanks stopped on the far side. They had fuel, they had a clear road, they could hear the guns at Arnhem. But they stopped to brew tea, to refuel, to wait for infantry support, because that was the book. Lieutenant General Brian Horrocks, commanding 30 Corps, was physically and mentally exhausted, having returned to duty too soon after being wounded. He failed to drive his division commanders with the necessary urgency. The 43rd Division took 30 hours to travel 60 miles up a secure corridor. They moved like tourists, not like rescuers. By the time the leading elements reached the Rhine, the men at the Arnhem Bridge had already been overrun. The courage of the paratroopers was rendered irrelevant by the sluggishness of the tanks sent to save them. Finally, we must consider the consequences for those who were caught in the middle. The Dutch civilians had welcomed the Allies as liberators. They had helped the paratroopers, hiding them in their homes, digging trenches, risking everything. When the Allies retreated, the Germans took a horrific revenge. The immediate fighting killed perhaps 3,000 Dutch civilians, but the long-term cost was the hunger winter. In retaliation for the resistance's support of the Allied operation, the Nazis blockaded the cities, cutting off food and fuel. Thousands of Dutch men, women and children starved to death in the months that followed, their liberation indefinitely postponed. This is the final ledger of strategic ineptitude. It's not just about soldiers lost, it's about the civilian population that was encouraged to resist and then abandoned to face the occupiers' fury. The operation's failure didn't just delay the Allied advance by 6 months, it sentenced an entire nation to a winter of starvation. So, why remember Market Garden, not as a gallant failure, but as a study in incompetence? Because the lessons are timeless. It demonstrates that courage at the tactical level cannot compensate for stupidity at the strategic level. It shows that ignoring intelligence because it doesn't fit the narrative is a betrayal of the soldiers who have to fight. And it proves that rigid, by-the-book thinking in a fluid, chaotic situation will always lose to an enemy empowered to use his initiative. For the survivalist and the serious student of conflict, Market Garden is a cautionary tale about relying on the plan. The plan is always fragile. It is the leadership on the ground, the adaptability of small units, and the ruthless drive to achieve the objective that matters. The men at Arnhem did their job. The men above them did not. Remember the difference. If you value in-depth historical analysis that looks beyond the myths, hit that subscribe button. Share this video with someone who needs to understand that in war, good intentions are no substitute for hard thinking. This is War Machiner.